Deep within the outskirts of the city, hidden among overgrown trees and broken roads, stands an abandoned factory. It has been vacant for decades, its windows shattered, and the metal structure slowly decaying. But it's not the passage of time that keeps people away. It's something far more sinister. Local legends speak of strange occurrences, eerie lights, and unnatural sounds coming from inside the factory late at night. The factory wasn't always deserted. Years ago, it was a bustling center of industry, employing hundreds of workers. But something happened, something dark. One by one, workers began to disappear, and soon, the factory shut down without warning. The locals say the place is cursed, that something evil now lurks inside, something not of this world. But despite the warnings, one night, a group of friends decided to explore the old factory. They were searching for answers, but what they found was far worse than they could have ever imagined. The friends entered through the rusted gates, the old metal creaking as if to warn them to turn back. The air was thick, and the smell of rot lingered in the wind. Every step they took echoed through the hollowed-out remains of the factory. Faded warning signs hung from the walls, and forgotten machinery stood like skeletal remains of a time long past. At first, everything seemed quiet, too quiet. As they ventured deeper into the factory, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Shadows danced on the walls, and the temperature seemed to drop with every passing minute. One of them joked about ghosts, but no one laughed. The oppressive silence made them uneasy, as though the factory itself was alive, waiting. Then, from somewhere deep within, they heard it, a faint, distant whisper. It was so quiet they weren't even sure it was real. But as they moved forward, the whisper grew louder, more distinct, and more menacing. They followed the sound, their flashlights barely piercing the darkness around them. The deeper they went, the stronger the feeling of dread became. Suddenly, the whispering stopped. It was replaced by something worse, a low, guttural growl, reverberating through the air like a warning from an unseen entity. The friends froze, their hearts pounding in their chests. Then, without warning, one of them screamed and pointed toward the far corner of the room. There, just beyond the reach of their lights, they saw it, a dark, shifting figure watching them from the shadows. It wasn't human. Its eyes glowed faintly, burning with a cold, unnatural light. It stood still, waiting, almost daring them to come closer. But when they took a step back, the figure moved. It slithered out of the shadows with inhuman speed, its form shifting between smoke and solid mass, as if reality itself was warping around it. This was no ghost. This was something older, something more dangerous. It was the Jinn. As they fled from the entity, they stumbled into an old office at the far end of the factory. The door slammed behind them, as though it had a mind of its own. Inside, the room was filled with dust-covered files and faded documents, evidence of the factory's forgotten past. Desperate to find answers, they rifled through the papers. Hidden among the debris, they found a journal. It belonged to one of the factory's former workers, a man who had witnessed the horrors before the factory closed. The journal spoke of strange rituals conducted late at night, deep within the factory's basement. The workers had unknowingly disturbed something ancient when the factory was first built, a portal to another world. The journal warned that the factory was cursed, that the Jinn had been awakened, and they would not rest until they had claimed every soul that entered. Realizing the gravity of their situation, the friends knew they had to leave, but escaping wasn't going to be that easy. The growls returned, louder this time, echoing through the halls like a beast stalking its prey. The lights on their flashlights flickered, and the air grew colder than ever. As they made their way to the exit, the shadows seemed to shift, closing in around them. Every corner they turned, every hallway they ran through, the presence followed them, relentless, unyielding. One by one, the friends began to experience strange things. One heard voices calling her name from the walls. Another saw hands reaching out from the darkness, trying to drag him into the void. The factory was no longer just a building. It had become a maze of fear, twisting and distorting reality around them. Suddenly, one of them disappeared. They heard his screams, but they couldn't find him. He was gone, swallowed by the factory, taken by the Jinn. The remaining friends ran for their lives, knowing they were running out of time. They finally reached the basement, where the journal had mentioned the ritual site. The room was filled with strange symbols etched into the floor, glowing faintly in the darkness. In the center was a large, rusted metal door, locked tight. It was the only way out. But as they tried to open it, the growling returned, louder than ever. The Jinn was close, and this time, it wasn't going to let them escape. The air grew heavy, and the room seemed to pulse with dark energy. Shadows swirled around them, and the temperature dropped to an icy chill. They knew they had to act fast. One of the friends, in desperation, began reading from the journal, reciting an old incantation in the hopes of sealing the portal and trapping the Jinn. But the words only seemed to anger the entity further. It appeared before them, its form twisting and writhing, a mass of shadow and fire. Its eyes glowed with hatred, and its voice, low and echoing, filled the room with a sense of dread, unlike anything they had ever felt. With one final push, they managed to break the lock and open the door. They fled into the night, the cold air biting at their skin as they ran as fast as they could, not daring to look back. The factory loomed behind them, silent once again, but they knew it wasn't over. The Jinn had let them go, for now, but the factory's curse remained, and as they left the grounds, they could still hear the whispers in the wind, the faint growl of the Jinn, watching, waiting for its next victims. The survivors would never speak of what they saw, but they would never forget. The factory still stands to this day, a monument to the darkness that lies within, and those who enter may never return. So if you ever find yourself near the abandoned factory on the outskirts of town, remember the stories, remember the warnings. The Jinn are patient. They are always watching, waiting for the next group of explorers to make the same mistake. Because once you enter the factory, you might never leave.